My name is Megan, and for the past 3 years, I believed that keeping a family together meant staying silent. I worked as a bookkeeper, and numbers had always made sense to me. They never lied, never changed depending on who was speaking. People, however, were different. They could smile while hiding prejudice, accept kindness without gratitude, and convince themselves they were right even when they were hurting a child. My husband, Greg, was a hard-working man with a gentle heart. Together, we lived in a cozy blue house with our 7-year-old daughter, June. Greg also had 2 older children, Tyler and Hannah, from his previous marriage. They stayed with us every weekend and during school breaks. To me, there was never a difference between the 3 children. They laughed together, argued like siblings, and filled our home with warmth. Unfortunately, Greg's mother, Janet, didn't share that view. Every Sunday, we visited Greg's parents in Cedar Hollow. Janet always welcomed Tyler and Hannah with open arms, calling them her precious grandchildren. June, on the other hand, was treated like a guest who had overstayed her welcome. Janet never called her our granddaughter. Instead, she'd ask, "How's Megan's little girl?" as though June had nothing to do with the Walsh family. At Christmas, Tyler and Hannah received piles of carefully wrapped presents, while June was handed a single small gift. Whenever June proudly brought one of her colorful drawings to her grandmother, Janet accepted it with a polite smile. Later, I'd find those same drawings folded inside the recycling bin. The hardest part was watching June slowly notice the difference. One afternoon, she quietly asked, "Mommy, why doesn't Grandma love me like Tyler and Hannah?" I hugged her tightly, but no answer felt big enough to heal that wound. Despite Janet's behavior, Greg and I continued helping his parents whenever they needed us. Greg's father, Roy, struggled with serious heart problems, and the medication alone cost hundreds of dollars every month. Their old roof began leaking after a harsh winter, and repairs were far beyond what they could afford. Without telling anyone, I covered the expenses. Every month, I paid for Roy's medicine, groceries, roof repairs, property taxes, and countless other bills. Janet believed the money came from Greg's paycheck. I never corrected her. I wasn't helping them for recognition. I simply wanted to do what was right. Still, because I was a bookkeeper, I kept records of every payment, every receipt, every bank transfer. Every dollar was carefully documented, not because I planned to use them someday, but because that's simply how I organized my life. Months became years. Greg often asked me to be patient with his mother. "She'll come around," he'd say. I wanted to believe him. Then something wonderful happened. Greg decided he wanted to adopt June officially. He told me that being her father in his heart wasn't enough anymore. He wanted the law to recognize what already existed between them. 6 weeks before his birthday, we stood in a courtroom where a judge finalized the adoption. Greg proudly accepted every responsibility of fatherhood, and June officially became June Walsh. She wasn't just his stepdaughter anymore. She was his daughter in every legal and emotional sense. We decided to surprise the family during Greg's birthday celebration. I carefully placed the adoption papers inside a large envelope and slipped it into my handbag. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to hope. Maybe those papers would finally convince Janet to open her heart. Greg's birthday arrived on a gray Saturday morning. June wore her favorite green dress and carried a handmade drawing she couldn't wait to give her father. I also ordered a birthday cake decorated with 8 names: Greg, me, June, Tyler, Hannah, Janet, Roy, Brenda, Greg's sister. 8 names. 8 members of one family. As we arrived at Janet's house, I noticed something immediately. The dining table had only 7 place settings. I counted twice. 7 chairs, 7 plates, 7 napkins. My heart sank. Someone had already decided that one member of our family didn't deserve a seat. June quietly looked from the table to me, silently reaching the same heartbreaking conclusion. Without saying a word, she moved closer and slipped her small hand into mine. I squeezed it gently, unaware that dinner hadn't even begun, and our family's biggest confrontation was only moments away. Before dinner, June proudly handed Greg the birthday drawing she had spent all week making. It showed the 5 of us standing hand in hand in front of our little blue house. Across the top, in careful first-grade handwriting, she had written, Mommy, Daddy, me, Tyler, Hannah. Greg's eyes filled with emotion. This is the best birthday present I've ever received, he whispered as he hugged her tightly. June beamed with pride. But Janet barely glanced at the picture before announcing that dinner was ready. As everyone gathered around the dining table, Brenda casually walked over to June and smiled. Sweetheart, why don't you eat in the den? There's a TV in there, and you'll be much more comfortable. I immediately stepped forward. June belongs here with her family. Brenda's smile faded, but before she could answer, Janet placed a firm hand on June's shoulder. This table, she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, is for blood. The room fell silent. Then she looked directly at me. Your daughter can eat in the other room. June looked up at me, confused and frightened. I felt my heart shatter. Greg was in the kitchen, carrying in the birthday cake, and hadn't heard a single word. Janet gently but deliberately began guiding June toward the hallway leading to the den. When June hesitated, Janet gave her a small push. It wasn't hard enough to leave a bruise, but it was enough to tell a little girl she didn't belong. June stumbled and caught herself against the doorway. At that exact moment, her birthday drawing slipped from Greg's arm and landed on the floor between them. No one moved. Tyler immediately stood from his chair. Hannah looked ready to cry. Roy lowered his head in shame. I crossed the room, picked up June's drawing, and wrapped my arm around her shoulders. Then I faced Janet. My voice remained calm. Don't ever put your hands on my daughter again. Before Janet could argue, Greg finally entered the room and saw everyone's expressions. What happened? He asked quietly. Tyler answered before anyone else could. Grandma pushed June because she said she isn't real family. Greg slowly looked from Tyler to Hannah, then to June's tearful face, and finally to his mother. What exactly did you say? Janet crossed her arms. I told the truth. She's not your real daughter. Blood is blood. Greg's expression changed. He wasn't angry. He was deeply disappointed. Without saying another word, he looked at me. I understood. The time for silence was over. I reached into my handbag and removed the large manila envelope. Placing it gently on the dining table, I slid the adoption decree toward Janet. 6 weeks ago, I said calmly, Greg legally adopted June. Janet stared at the official court seal. I continued. Her name is now June Walsh. By law, she is Greg's daughter in every way. She has the same rights, the same name, and the same place in this family as Tyler and Hannah. The color drained from Janet's face. Tyler grinned. So she's really our sister? Greg smiled warmly. She always was. Hannah immediately took June's hand. Tears finally rolled down June's cheeks, not from sadness, but from relief. Then I removed the second folder. This, I said, opening it carefully, contains every payment I've made for this household over the last 3 years. I pointed to page after page. Roy's heart medication, the roof repairs, groceries, property taxes, emergency expenses. The total is nearly $40,000. Everyone stared in disbelief. I paid every dollar, I continued. Not Greg, me. While my daughter was being treated like an outsider, I was quietly keeping this household afloat. Roy slowly removed his glasses. His voice trembled. It's true. Janet looked completely speechless. Greg stepped beside me and gently placed June's drawing on the table next to the adoption papers. Then he looked directly at his mother. You pushed my daughter away today, he said softly. The little girl I promised to protect for the rest of my life. He paused. If June isn't family to you anymore, then neither is our support. He reached down, lifted June into his arms, and turned toward the door. I gathered the papers. Then something beautiful happened. Tyler stood up. If June can't eat here, he said firmly, neither can I. Hannah immediately followed him. The 5 of us walked out together, Greg carrying June, Tyler and Hannah beside us, and me holding the papers that had finally revealed the truth. We never argued. We never shouted. We simply left. That night, I canceled every financial transfer except Roy's essential medication, which I paid directly to the pharmacy so his health wouldn't suffer. Months later, Janet still hadn't apologized. But our home had never felt warmer. Our refrigerator remained covered with June's colorful drawings. Her newest masterpiece showed all five of us holding hands in front of our blue house. In the corner, she proudly signed her name for the very first time. June Walsh. That simple signature reminded me of something far more important than blood. Family isn't defined by biology. Family is defined by the people who show up, stay, and choose to love one another every single day.